Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Logos Project. This is your host, Dom, and in today's video, I am joined by Brayden from the Catechumen. Brayden, how you doing? It's good to have you on the show.
Doing wonderful. I always love watching your intro because I think it's like the best out there. Honestly, like the page turn, and it's like the roots going down. I'm like, man, I gotta
Yeah,
rebrand or something because that's awesome. But yeah, I'm glad to be here with you, and
thanks.
yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, so I came across your channel. There was this video that you did. I think it was like a response to Dr. Ortland. It was on ecclesiology, and
Mm.
I was like, "Huh, this guy's pretty good. We should probably look out for this guy." So, and then you were in Kyle's chat, and I'm like, "Huh, let me see if he wants to do a video."
Yeah, wait a second. Yeah, he's in Kyle's Discord. It's like Kyle knows everyone. I don't know. I
I
don't know
know.
about you, but I'm like, man, like I've learned of everybody that I know of like Catholic YouTubers I know through Kyle. Like Kyle's like the guy.
Exactly. Well, that actually brings up a good topic, which is there's this conference coming up in Steubenville.
Yes.
What is it? It's July. Is it 11th? I can't
I
remember.
think it's like the 14th through
Yeah,
I think it's the 14th through like 8 or I don't even know. Let
yeah,
me see. Yeah, like
my,
19th, something like that. I don't
yeah.
know.
My phone, my
I'm not good
phone
with
will
dates.
remind me. I won't be
Yeah.
late.
Yeah, like I'll get a notification the day before. Oh yeah, I gotta drive like 14 hours. All right, let's do this thing.
Yep,
But it's
exactly.
yeah,
Same.
I'm Catholic Creators Conference put on by Kyle, and yeah, there's gonna be a lot of us there. You know, Drew's gonna be there, Swan's gonna be there.
Yeah, I'm
A lot
really
of a
looking
lot of
forward.
guys.
Yeah, so because I can finally, meet other Catholic YouTubers like you, like Drew. I mean, I've been doing videos with Drew now for a while, and I haven't
Uh-huh.
met him in person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's going to be great, and get to talk to Swan, Kyle. I've met Kyle in person. That's actually
Yeah.
an interesting story, but I get to talk to Matt Frad. Will be at the St. Paul Center. That's
Yeah.
going to be a good time. So if you're a content creator and you want to come, hurry up. I think those tickets are running out. So
Yeah, I think there's a few left, but we've Kyle's been like, okay, let's drop a few more on the online, and
yeah,
then they
exactly.
kind of fill up, and we had to switch venues again. That's why we're at the St. Paul Center, is because there's so many
Yeah,
people that were wanting to come. So yeah, I think there's a few spots left. So if you're a Catholic creator, yeah, come and join us for some
definitely.
fraternity.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to be driving up there, so it's going to be like I don't know, maybe I don't know, like 9 hours for me, maybe more than
Hmm.
that. So it's gonna be good though. I'm probably gonna listen to an audiobook or something.
Oh yeah, I always
Um,
love those long drives. I cue the podcast, the YouTube videos, and the audiobooks. You gotta learn to listen on like 2 or 3 times speed. That way you can maximize the amount of information that you get, and your brain is kind of fried at the end. But it's all good. It's for the kingdom.
Man,
You know what I'm
this
saying?
is why we all got ADHD. But yes, I agree.
No, you're right. That's probably why it's like really hard to stay on track with the conversation.
Yeah. So the other day, I think you were in the chat box when Drew and I were making a video, and you said that you are studying at Holy Apostles as well.
Yes, yeah. I finished my first 2 semesters, and I took a break over the summer because I've got some
Okay.
debates and dialogues and stuff planned that I want to kind of
Oh,
study up for.
nice.
But yeah, first 2 semesters, basically a year of graduate school down, and I've
Nice.
really enjoyed getting an explicitly Catholic
Yeah.
education. I've had kind of the charismatic from ORU, then I transferred
Mm.
to Oklahoma Baptist, get the Baptist
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah, I just kind of embrace
Yeah.
the Catholic tradition that has a much broader, I think more deep theological and philosophical tradition that
Yeah.
kind of covers every area of life. So it's pretty fascinating studying from that perspective.
No, definitely. What are you majoring in?
It's going to be an MA in theological studies, but there's a concentration in church history, and that's one of the reasons why I picked Holy Apostles. It's because it's one of the only MA programs, online MA programs, that has that
Mm,
degree path. And so, and
yeah.
I really value online education right now with my life. I moved back home to be with family. We just had a baby. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to like move everywhere. So
Yep.
yeah, it's very beneficial doing it that way.
Definitely. No, I mean, so we're going to be at the St. Paul Center, and this is actually, I think, a good segue into one thing I want to talk about, which is that Scott Hahn is the founder of St. Paul Center, and my way into the Bible as a Catholic, like a deeper dive into the Bible, other than hearing the Word of God at Mass, which is how it's supposed to be, but a deeper like personal study of Scripture I mean, there were several steps, but one of them was reading Scott Hahn's Kinship by Covenant. It's like this
Mhm.
fat volume about how to understand through the lens of covenantal theology how the Old and
Yeah.
the New Testaments work. So I'm really excited to, maybe he'll be there and we can ask him some questions. But that
Yeah, that'd
kind
be
of wanted
awesome.
me that. So I was wondering, like, what are some good resources that have led you into the Catholic Church? Maybe tell me a little bit more how you became
Oh
Catholic.
man.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the first thing I want to bring up is the covenant theology, that kind of theme that makes so
yeah,
much sense when you think about it, because Scott Hahn comes from a Presbyterian background, and that's something that
yeah,
they really like to emphasize. So
yep,
I love how, we bring our flavors and influences, and they're purified when we come into the fullness of the faith, and we're able to
yeah,
really articulate them well.
yeah,
But yeah, some of the, it was really, for me and for many, it was the church fathers, getting
yeah,
introduced to them, being fascinated by them, seeing the way they articulate theology, and in such a, it seems foreign lens, when you're an evangelical. And so
yeah.
one of the best resources that I found whenever I was kind of discerning was the 3-volume set, William Jurgens, the Faith of the Early Fathers.
Oh, yeah,
I always point to it, but like everything's mirrored. It's that right
yeah,
there. So yeah, you'll find them at Catholic bookstores, on Amazon and stuff like that. It's a wonderful, like, chronological. Um, it gives important excerpts from the writings of the church fathers, from the like the early patristic era to like the post Nicene, like
yeah,
nearly 700s, I believe. And so
mhm,
it's a great kind of broad sweep of the fathers, but it also has a doctrinal index. So if you're
mhm,
reading and you come across something that kind of piques your interest, you can go back and kind of flip to all the different page
yeah,
numbers that kind of touches that same topic. But those were definitely great. I'm a big YouTube watcher, Gen Z, so that's just that kind of makes sense for me. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
was very early on introduced to Steve Ray. He's a Baptist convert. I
Oh,
was able to
yeah,
meet him at the Oklahoma men or Catholic Men's Conference, I think, in Oklahoma City.
okay,
And he was a major influence, at least getting into apologetics, but also, the Catholic Answers crew, Trent Horn,
yeah,
Jimmy Akin, Joe Heschmeyer a little bit later on. I forget when he
yeah,
joined, but it seemed like he was a fairly new apologist, right when
yeah,
I was kind of discerning. They've written some great books that was also, helping me, but it was mainly
yeah,
online free resources, which is kind of what encouraged me to kind of keep the conversation going and expanding that online.
yeah,
Because I think having these free resources on YouTube, being able to consult something that goes very deep but makes it like popular level, will definitely help in the Catholic Protestant dialogue, which again is kind of the area that I'm interested in. And yeah, so
yeah.
mainly YouTube, mainly articles, and then I get in the books later. But I'm trying to think of
No,
what
no.
else. But yeah, that was
Well,
sacred scripture. Sacred scripture is a
scripture.
big one. Learning to read it with the what did
Yeah,
Swan call it on our pod, or not podcast, live stream, the hermeneutic or ecclesiological hermeneutic,
yeah,
the exegeting kind of approach of the church through the ages, learning to read it in that sense instead of just
yeah.
kind of, what do I think of this passage? John 3:5. Well, I don't want to believe that's baptism, but
Yeah.
hey, I mean, so yeah, I'm kind of scatterbrained. It's because this
No, no,
conversation's not 3 times speed. I'm
yeah.
telling you.
No, this is great. I mean, I think what's interesting is that most people, even if it's not Catholicism, but for our sake, especially Catholicism, most people come across it precisely through YouTube or through the internet,
Yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
that's why I think it's so important that we get that game right,
right.
that we start to spend our resources and our studying, and then kind of the fruit of that to present it on YouTube, because there's a lot of stuff out there where I'm like, "Oh my
Mm,
goodness, that's awful,"
yeah,
And then there's
yeah,
there's some stuff that I'm like, oh, "Okay, that's really good. More of that, please." So I
yeah.
think most people come to these things through the internet. So there better be some good, like, serious resources on there. So
Right. There's a
yeah,
lot of competing voices for sure. And
yeah,
the truth
mhm,
is going to win out. But it needs
yeah,
to be fueled, it needs to be kind of proclaimed, because if you have a lot of voices out there that are teaching falsely and not that many voices that are teaching truth, then it's like, can kind of
yeah,
get mixed up. So yeah, that's why it's definitely helpful to have creators online with different kind of study niches and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think what I've noticed is that there's a difference, just in general, not just online, but it comes out online. There's a difference between knowing a lot of information and being wise, right? Like having a kind of a contemplative perspective, right? And I can tell sometimes when I'm online, I'm looking through some videos and articles. I'm like, this person knows some stuff, but they don't strike me as very, I don't know, intellectually virtuous. Like they don't have those virtues that make for wise thinking, although they might know a lot of different things. And so I don't know. That's another thing is that maybe like teaching people how to perceive when someone is worth listening to and when someone is definitely just not worth listening to.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah, that's
but
a good thought. Yeah, for sure.
So tell me more about what are some books that you read that were like, wow, this really like convinced me on this or helped me understand this. Are there any books that stick out to you? Sorry to ask all these questions. I'm just curious.
That's fine. This will actually encourage me to kind of give a formulated, like, pre-thought book list. I think that's something that I need to do. But just thinking off the top of my head, I really enjoyed, preface, coming from a Baptist perspective, you have this understanding that the popular church, like the noticeable church, sometime throughout history was corrupted. Somehow did a 180 on when they were teaching the pure New Testament congregational two sacrament non-salvific baptism kind of theology to the Catholic kind of baptism saves, and you have a 3-tier hierarchical ecclesiology and all these things. There's a shift somewhere. And one of the, besides reading the church fathers, one of the major ways that my thinking shifted on that topic of this sort of great apostasy or great turning from the purity of the gospel and of the faith was Joe Heschmeyer's The Early Church of the Catholic Church. It's a fairly recent book. And I think, I don't remember when in my conversion process that I got through it. I remember it was, I don't know how early it was actually, but it definitely helped me connect those dots about why the church fathers are important, why it's not really logical or historically consistent to say that there was this great apostasy early on, when some of the earliest writers that we can, Saint Ignatius, Saint Clement of Alexandria and Rome, and all these people that are very early, you can read their writings and they are expressing something that is explicitly Catholic a lot of the times. Obviously, like Orthodox Christology and Trinitarian theology and stuff like that. But Eucharistic theology, baptismal salvation, and so he goes through a few of the proofs. Talks about the necessity of bishops and the 3-tier hierarchy, and again sacramental theology and stuff like that. And so that was helping me connect the dots as a Baptist as to like, oh man, my theory that the church just did a 180 and just randomly kind of forgot and assumed some like pagan influences just doesn't really make sense given the historical data, and given these people were discipled by the apostles and put in their leadership positions by the apostles as if they were trusted men, as Paul says, who are able to teach, right? And so that helped me connect the dots. There were a few other books. Trent, I'm trying to remember which ones were helpful in that time period. Trent Horn, Why We're Catholic, was a pretty good evidentialist approach. And so he goes straight from like theism to or deism to theism, and like having all these evidential layers going to the resurrection and straight to the Catholic faith. And that was helpful in building kind of this apologetic approach that isn't presupposing a whole lot of things. Obviously, you have to have your first principles, but you're not. You know what I'm trying to say. I can't remember some of the other major ones, but I know there's a bunch. So I need to get a list up.
No, it's funny because you mentioned the bishop, right? I mean, what comes to mind is Ignatius of Antioch. I mean, you read his letter to the Romans, and you just can't get around the fact that the episcopacy, we can talk about the monoepiscopacy, but the episcopacy as a sacramental reality is something that is part of Christianity from the very beginning. And then you get into Irenaeus, and to me, like, reading Against Heresies by Irenaeus was a watershed moment. I'm not a convert, but it was a watershed moment in my understanding of the church and why he was writing what he was writing and how he was responding to the Gnostics, who precisely had this understanding of a tradition that was not apostolic and therefore not one that had succession, right? And Irenaeus's point is that no, tradition is where there is succession. And so, this is to me, it's the understanding that the early church, right, when it's talking about apostolic succession and the right understanding of the faith, understanding that it's a response to Gnosticism, to me is a historical slam dunk against any kind of Protestant ecclesiology. But that's a broad statement. I know that. But
well, I mean, it's true with the succession of bishops in St. Irenaeus, and the preservation of tradition through that means is definitely very big in Against Heresies. And he's the one that really emphasizes apostolic succession. And so does St. Ignatius, but his emphasis of Eucharistic theology against the Gnostics is wonderful as well. And that was, he says it multiple times in his epistles. I forget which ones, but there's like 2 or 3 occasions in these epistles where he's saying, look, if you abstain, if someone abstains from the Eucharist because it's a proclamation that Jesus was incarnate, because it turns into his flesh, because it's his true body that became this sacrifice for us, then don't associate with him. He's not a part of the church. And so it's a wonderful apologetic, but it's also very beautiful the way that they articulate it. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a big draw.
And especially that connection between the bishop and the Eucharist. I mean, is there in Ignatius in a way that Ratzinger once had this line. He said, ecclesial realism requires Eucharistic realism, and Eucharistic realism requires ecclesial realism. So you can't have the church without the Eucharist. And here's a good book that I recommend to Protestants and Catholics, because oftentimes, this is a pet peeve of mine, I feel like Catholics oversell their position and Protestants undersell theirs, when there's actually a lot more common ground. I'm talking about the book Transubstantiation by Brett Salkeld. I interviewed him on it. I'll put it in the show notes, but if you ever get your hands on it, I strongly recommend. It's there's a kind of a competing, like some Protestants think that the Protestant tradition is this like Swiss, Zwinglian memorialism, but the Protestant tradition has a real presence tradition that's quite vast, in fact. And then sometimes on the Catholic side, I see this kind of presentation that's almost like materialistic in a reductive way. Like it's really real because it's all material. It's like, and I'm like, that's not actually what the church says. She says that he's really, truly, and substantially present, not
never physically.
She doesn't actually use that word. So you have to understand the metaphysics, get into what is St. Thomas actually saying. And I was shocked to find out, St. Thomas argues against local presence. I was like, what? In the Summa, he says Christ is truly and really present, but he's not present locally, because locality has to do with the accidents. So there's a lot more to that. But so anyway, so my video with Dr. Brett there was pretty
that's fascinating.
Some friends.
You piqued my interest. I have to add it to my book list. There's like a trillion books that you start reading at the same time. You're like 10 pages in on like 20 books. I gotta add another one, because you sold me already.
No, so I guess that we kind of started talking about some of the weaknesses in Catholic. Well, before we talk about that, I do want to talk about some of the strengths in Catholic apologetics. I mean, for me, I think I saw it in the video that you did on ecclesiology. I think ecclesiologically, like it's not a fair fight.
Especially when you have these like super ahistorical kind of articulations of like of congregational elder-led church polity, where it's like this loose confederation of like like-minded individuals who like vote democratically on like doctrine and practice and
That's
stuff.
not a
It's
sustainable
like
ecclesiology. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what we were taught. I mean, I have a Baptist textbook that we were given at OBU that teaches, that is the teaching of the New Testament. That's the practice of the New Testament. And then St. Ignatius introduced the 3-tier hierarchical model. And I'm like, St. Ignatius introduced it. And it's like, when you read the letters, it's like he's writing to bishops. He's mentioning bishops by name and saying, submit to the bishop that you have as Jesus Christ submits to the Father. And it's like, how can you read St. Ignatius's letters and come away with the conclusion he is introducing this radically new ecclesiology and church polity that it like is complete odds with congregationalism, and no one puts up a fight. Everyone accepts it. There's no trace of congregationalism in the historical record. And he doesn't even make an argument for it. He's just saying, this is what we got to do. Cause like, that's what Christianity teaches, you know, he's assuming it. So it's, some of those articulations are rather ridiculous. And the same sort of thing goes with the Presbyterian church polity. Although it's better, it's more in line with the data we have. It's still like a almost complete like rejection of what the historical record indicates, you know. And so when someone drives a hard division between the practice of the New Testament and the practice of second generation Christians living in the early 2nd century, I just like, I get a bad taste in my mouth, because it's just like, what are you talking? There's no like, sorry, no, I can rant on and on about that, but it's ridiculous.
I want to bring something up because recently, and by recently I mean maybe within the last year, maybe year and a half, I've noticed a lot of our dearly beloved Protestant friends getting frustrated at our quoting of Newman, right? When he says to be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to add my 2 cents real quick on the topic. You know, I think that is actually a fair complaint, that you can't just throw that out. But it's only fair if you're using it out of context, because Newman was Anglican. And I think that his point was, as an Anglican, to be deep in history is to cease to be an Anglican. And I think that has to do with precisely, you know, the ecclesiology question. And but as a Protestant, this is the thing. History it doesn't exist on its own. Like, you have to interpret it. There's no such thing as like objective, like even in science
approaches,
right? Like even in science, like what's it called when they study quantum mechanics, right? It's like the observer has an effect on the result of the experiment, right? So if you know, to be deep in history does not necessarily lead to becoming Catholic, because you can take all of the data, right, and configure it according to your hermeneutic and not end up Catholic. And that's, I think, a huge problem, right? Which is that we have, especially with the online world, we have all of these competing hermeneutics and people that can voice them. And it just confuses everyone because everyone's watching YouTube. And so people feel lost. I think it actually kind of contributes to the loss of meaning, because it's this idea that there's no solid answer. Anyway, so my point is to say that, look, Newman was talking as an Anglican. And I think if you come to history with Anglican presuppositions, you will lose them and become Catholic. But if you come with more low church presuppositions, I think you could stay a Protestant, because you're going to be reinterpreting. That's the thing. Anglicanism is closer. And so some of the principles of Anglicanism are more inconsistent, I think, if you hold on to them. That's why he became Catholic.
Yeah, it depends on your methodology for sure. And someone once said, I forget who it is or who, I know who it's like, who I heard it from, but I know that that's not where the term originated or phrase originated. But it's a modification of to be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant, because it's like, you cease to be Protestant, but that doesn't mean that you automatically, like you were saying, go to the Catholic Church. There is this ongoing dialogue between Catholics and Orthodox, or, you know, the different flavors of Eastern Christianity. And so while it's like, yeah, you cease to be Protestant if you take a particular approach to the fathers, and which I think we would agree was the correct approach to the fathers, and seeing them as preservers of the faith rather than deformers of the faith.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nuance that goes into that. You leave Protestantism, but like, where do you go? And I see a lot of that, especially from Dr. Gavin Ortlund and others who are in that kind of dialogue, and they say, well, not really. And it can be it can be a source of some frustration, which I get it. You know, I get when someone just comments under your video, to be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant, and you're like,
it can be frustrating if you're a Protestant.
Like, oh my goodness, like, I've read Catholic books before, you know, like I know I've heard this 1,000 times. It's like in the preface of every single Catholic Apologetics book. I've read this. It can be frustrating. I get it. And so, it requires nuance. And I think as a Plythe remark, like, I think it definitely should cease to be used in that sense as kind of like a clapback, or, you know, whatever, because that's not really advancing the kingdom. That's kind of just building yourself up. Like, look at me, like I can quote this Newman section when Newman probably wouldn't have used it that way, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I like to tell some of my Protestant friends that actually Eric's in the chat. He's Protestant, and you know, I keep telling him, because we talk about this a bit, and I keep telling him, dude, like, try to be more Protestant. Like, read Luther, you know, read Calvin. Like, if only Protestants were more Reformed, right?
Speaking of that, I am so jealous of your Luther volume to your left on this screen. The complete work. I've seen that on online so much. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to pick that up. But it's like $1 trillion or something.
Yeah. No, it's a good reference. You know, it's called What Luther Says, and it's
Luther
got
Says. That's right.
Yeah, it's got some good. You know, when I'm writing a paper or something, and I'm like, oh, what did Luther think? I go to the index. Okay, Luther on ecclesiology, on the Pope, you know, or something.
Man, my mouth is watering.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I think that part of the process for me when I talk to Protestants is to encourage them to actually recover the tradition that comes from the founders, specifically Luther and Calvin, not because I want them to stay there, but because those are much more interesting interlocutors than like kind of low church evangelical Christianity. I think it's more interesting if they go back to the reformers.
Well, when you read the reformers, they definitely try and incorporate quotations from the fathers, and
that's right, especially Calvin. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you read the Book of Concord, even, like, there's a lot of quotations from the fathers in there, and it's like, you know, when you start interacting with those mature, robust articulations of the Protestant faith, then you start to get a grasp of kind of the dialogue that's going on then, that kind of flavors how we understand, you know, subjectively each other's traditions today. And so, while a lot of the concerns and the dialogues happening today may not have happened then, in a sense, you know, because there's kind of a shift. Reading those founding documents and you know, the classical Protestants is very helpful.
I think that would be like fruitful ecumenism. Wait, just a second. We got Drew in the chat.
What a nerd. What a nerd.
No, I think that fruitful ecumenism is when we can go, you know, we can go back to those texts, you know, of the like the Book of Concords and stuff like that. But, you know, here's the thing about the fathers, right? The fathers are interpreters of revelation in a certain sense, historically, of the undivided church. So in a certain sense, even though we all agree that not everything a church father says is, you know, ex cathedra, right? It's not infallible.
No,
right?
everything in these 3 volumes over here are all infallible. That's my infallible list of infallible statements from the infallible church fathers.
Exactly. No, but I mean, it opens up this fruitful conversation where it's like, well, what was the spirit of the fathers? And maybe we can iron out some things. I mean, I'm thinking of the joint declaration on justification was at least academically or like amongst theologians, it was definitely a way forward, although it didn't really have an effect on the ground, I don't think.
Well, if you
So,
read the associated documents that come with it, with
mhm,
their kind of the outcome of the research, it's very
mhm,
fascinating. It's not in print anymore. It's from like some Augsburg something publishers. It's one of my
mhm,
favorite books I read on the Joint Declaration because it has the Joint Declaration, but it has the associated research documents and like articles, journal articles in it, like
mhm,
compiled in it. And the concessions that are made about the history are comparable to the Justitia Dei by Alistair McGrath, just kind of
mm.
explaining like
Oh,
the fathers, but like while there were articulations of the faith alone formula, and we can talk about that in a little bit because I think that
yeah,
Catholics often overcorrect in
I agree.
their
I agree.
condemnation of that. Um,
Yep.
the fathers, St. Thomas Aquinas, all like they use this formula of justification by sola fide, or
Mhm.
salvation by sola fide. And it's like, okay, how can this be the case in the Catholic tradition? And you start
Yes.
reading, it's like, oh well, they believe in a transformative justification.
Yes.
That's the our legal status before God
Yeah.
within a Protestant perspective is this extrinsic righteousness that God looks at, which is really Christ's immutable righteousness. But when he
All
looks
right.
at you, it's not in you.
Yeah.
But that's what the fathers confess is God creates this righteousness and infuses it within you, and you become ontologically righteous. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what's taught at Trent. And so it's like you read
Yeah.
the fathers, you go deep in their theology, you understand, oh, they use the sola fide formula, not in the same sense that Protestants use it, and they use
Yeah.
this transformative justification. How do these two things fit together? So it's
No,
fascinating. I love that
this is
stuff.
this is great. This is perfect. Let's talk about all the things that Catholic apologetics could do better online, and I think this is one of them. Right,
Yeah.
overselling our case, like faith alone. You actually can say that as a Catholic if by it you mean this. So I got this from Pope Benedict.
Ratzinger.
Yeah, yeah,
Or I
exactly.
guess
Right.
was it Pope Benedict? It was Pope Benedict at the time, yeah. That he
Yeah, yeah, at the time. Yeah, no, but it's throughout his work the idea, right? Which is that if by faith alone you mean Christian faith alone, the reason why that qualifier is important is because Christian faith is not the same as merely believing in certain propositional truths. It's
yeah.
believing in a person, and a person is not a propositional truth, right? Believing in, so you could say I believe things about a person, or I trust that this person will deliver based on a prior record. But if we actually stop and think about it, that sentence, I believe in you, is actually strange. It seems to
Yeah.
bring together truth and love in a way that's relational, right? It's like believing in a person already incorporates charity and the
Yeah.
desire for communion, which is hope. So faith, hope, and charity, this is what Trent says, right? Are indissoluble in a certain sense, precisely in baptism when you're justified, right? So here's
Yeah.
the thing. It's like, you know, uh, faith apart from works is a way of saying faith alone. And when James is saying not by faith alone, he's saying not by the kind of Protestant understanding. That's the way I read it, of
Yeah.
like assenting to, because the demons too, they know that certain things have
Yeah. They
happened and they
assent.
believe in
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's one example. Maybe it's like talking past each other on the faith and works thing, because I
Yeah.
hear a lot of Catholics that are like faith and works. I'm like, look, if you accuse Protestants of saying faith alone, I'm going to
Mhm.
accuse you of saying faith and works, because Paul says faith and not works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
And there's
right.
a wonderful articulation of believing in God in the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes.
He and
Yeah.
I went through this in a Holy Apostles class. I forget what is it, Faith and Revelation.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's the course.
Yeah. I took it too. Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. It's like you
Fides quod, fides
believe God.
que. And yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's you believe in
Yeah.
God, you believe God, or you believe unto God, and so you believe the
Yes.
things that God says. You believe in like that God is, and you
Hmm.
believe unto God, as in like the act of faith is that is your final, that is uh your telos. That is your telos. God is your telos.
Yeah.
That's who you're ultimately. That's your inheritance. But yeah, people will overcorrect in their condemnation of sola fide, saying the Catholic Church condemns sola fide. Don't say sola fide.
Yeah.
And while I feel uncomfortable describing it as we are saved by faith alone, simply because
Mhm.
the only time that it's
Scripture
mentioned in the New Testament
condemns
is
that.
James
Yeah. Yeah.
2:24. So that makes
Mhm.
me that gives me a little bit of tension that I don't like describing it that way. And
Mhm.
I love the we are saved by a faith that is formed or that is animated by charity. That
Yes.
articulation by
Yeah.
Pope Benedict
Or
the
working through
16th.
love, as Paul would say. Yeah.
Yeah, in Galatians 5.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful articulation of it, of the faith that we're speaking of, which is also, the classical Protestants understand faith must work in charity or else it's not faith. Whereas from the Catholic tradition, it's like, well, you can believe, you can have faith, you can have this faith, but you can destroy charity through sin. So you can still have faith while you're in a state of mortal sin. And so that's kind of where the difference is. They say faith can't exist without charity. We say faith is dead without charity. But I definitely think that the articulation that initial justification happens by faith alone is very beneficial to the conversation. And then subsequent justification happens by faith working through love. Because James 2:24 explicitly says that the works are justifying. So you have to have room for that in your theology. So yeah, the wholesale like condemnation of faith alone is definitely something I see too often in online Catholic apologetics that needs to kind of be toned back a little bit. Like I understand, like the face value, James 2:24 explicitly condemns that articulation, but Protestants typically don't articulate it that way. They have an erroneous understanding of true faith. So anyway, we can go on and on.
No. I think you're right. I mean, you're right. St. Thomas says that the form of faith is charity, right?
Right.
It's what, and so a living faith has the form of love, and that's basically what Benedict was saying, which is that Christian faith is one that implicates love, or else it's not Christian faith.
Yeah.
So
the soul is the form of the body, that's charity is the form of faith. And that's what James says is as the body is dead without the soul, so is faith dead without
works.
Yeah.
No, and I sometimes, because I talk to a bit of Protestants on the side. It's mostly Protestants who are interested in Catholicism and not like super critical about it, but I keep telling them, hey, read Trent, read Trent, like because they expect this like really hardcore, Pelagian text,
the Catholic Church is Pelagian. It's like who condemned Pelagius? Can you remind me? Like, there's some of the most like anti. There was a little bit in like the Middle Ages where you have some of that like cropping up a little bit, but really like the majority of Catholic theology is like, it's like very anti-Pelagian. You hear people because of Pope Francis's recent statement, we are the heart is fundamentally good, saying Pope Francis is a Pelagian now that he said that. But it's like, have you read what he talks about when he mentions Pelagianism? It's like, it's kind of brutal, So it's fun because there's a lack of nuance everywhere, and we're all kind of we have blind sides, so it's good to kind of slow down and really try and hear people out.
That's why I think that I think it's very easy to get lost in YouTube, right, and get confused, and you hear everybody and anybody's opinion on things. So I keep telling people, maybe take a break from YouTube and buy a book by someone that has a reputation for being wise. They don't have to be alive, and try to enter into the great tradition and try to be able to kind of navigate your way around, because I mean the tradition is huge, right? And so try to get your bearings, and always try to always focus on principles. Like, what are some fundamental principles, and use Occam's razor, and just think intelligently and with what I like to call intellectual virtues, right? If someone strikes you as polemical and arrogant, maybe he's biased. If someone has a humility to them and a spirituality, it's not that that's the only criteria, because good argument's a good argument, but there's so much stuff out there. It's kind of like trying to, it's overwhelming. I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. So. The introduction by C.S. Lewis to the volume of St. Athanasius on the Incarnation that I have, he speaks about the utility of reading one old book for every new book that you have. And don't read books because of there's blind sides that we all have. We all have certain biases that our culture and everything kind of influences us that we can't see. But when we read old books, we can get a perspective that isn't tainted by our culture
Yeah.
now. We can get a
Yeah.
broader, more deep, more rich, more objective. Obviously, they have their blind sides, but we can recognize that looking back.
Mhm.
But we can't recognize it. It's very hard to recognize it in the situation we're in right now. And so it can be a very helpful thing to read old books that have stood the test of time, that must be valuable in some sense if they have withstood the cultural pressures and kind of the decaying of, oh, there's new books coming up, what do we get rid of, or what do we libraries have those sales, like, oh,
Yeah.
which books aren't out that much, and kind of throw away in a box. But yeah, old books are very beneficial in that way.
And I think, I mean, that kind of piggybacking off of what you said earlier, that's what leads us to the question of, well, what has priority? Like what trumps other, like authoritatively, without, even as a Protestant, right? Like as a Protestant, you're investigating all the denominations, all the different claims. First of all, denominationalism is kind of an anachronistic way of looking at things in the first place. But that being said, what holds priority, in the interpretation of Scripture? And to me, it's the church fathers.
Yeah.
It's the common ground. They are able to mediate, because everyone wants to claim the church fathers for themselves, and those who don't, that's another problem, right?
Yeah.
The kind of apostasy.
We need the church fathers. We just need the Bible.
So that's where I'm like, I don't know what to do. Then I think at that point you can make some kind of basic, anti-sola scriptura arguments that will kind of at least broaden their horizons. But for the serious Protestants, we all agree, okay, we want the fathers to teach us, basically.
Yeah.
So how can we read them in a way where we take what they have to say at a higher level than maybe certain modern interpretations, while also trying not to read into the fathers a kind of, self-imposed hermeneutic, if that makes sense. So I do think understanding the fathers better is a fruitful path for true ecumenism. So
yeah. And speaking of what you talked about a little bit, the anachronistic reading of denominationalism, it's really fascinating, because when you hear some popular level Protestants talking about how denominations and schisms have existed from the New Testament time period, and you compare that to the ecclesiology of those schisms, it's like, do you think that they were validating those schisms, saying, well, they're not a part, they don't have our theology, they're not a part of our communion, but they're part of the church? No, the church understood herself as an institutional reality. And so when you read Diarmaid MacCulloch, his 3,000-year history of Christianity, he speaks of this 180-degree turn from speaking of the church and understanding the church as this institutional reality to a purely aggregation of true believers within the Protestant movement. And that's another thing. So there's justification, there's ecclesiology, that is a complete turn. And they'll try and like, oh, there are institutions that are a part of the church that don't necessarily they aren't the church themselves, but the true Christians are in them, and so we can call them churches. This kind of, I hate to call it sophistry, but it really is, when you're trying to kind of struggle through the fathers, when you're trying to see what they believed about the church. It's like that is one thing that you assume that you're kind of putting on them, this denominationalism. Oh, well, there's a schism 500 years before Protestantism, Eastern Orthodox and Catholic. It's like, when they were separate from each other, when they were in schism, did one believe that the other was a validly existing church apart from them? No, that's not at all how they saw it. And so I think this came up in my response to Dr. Gavin Ortlund when he was speaking about, oh, there's been schisms since the beginning. And it's like, that's a complete equivocation between the Protestant denominations and schisms in the past.
It really is. This is another thing that frustrates me. And here I'm kind of I'm accusing Catholics and Protestants here, so I'm trying to be fair in my in my judgment.
Oh, I'm not fair at all on this stream. No, not me.
No, so there's all this like arguing back and forth sometimes that I kind of look from the bleachers. I got my popcorn, I'm watching, and I'm thinking, what the heck? There's all of these philosophical presuppositions that are going on that people are just either oblivious to or actively ignoring because they just want to
Mm,
hold on to them. And it's
yeah.
like, so there's this great book by Dr. Andrew Wheeler Jones called Before Church and State, right? And in it, he argues and he shows how the category of the secular and the religious are literally modern creations,
Hmm.
right? If you go around in the Middle Ages and you ask someone, what religion are you a part of? You know what they would tell you? They'd be like, well, I'm Franciscan or I'm Benedictine, right? Like
Mhm.
religion does not mean the same thing at all. It's a
That's interesting.
completely different definition. And the secular in the Middle Ages was religious. It just meant the temporal extension of the church's mission in
Hmm.
of evangelizing. It meant, the justice and ethics and like what people don't understand is that secular is an adjective that was actually meant to describe priests,
That is
right?
fascinating. Huh.
Yeah, because religious, what's religious? Well, the monks are religious. Why? Because their job is religio, it's the liturgy.
Hmm.
Well, the priests that are parish priests were called secular priests because their job was to minister to the people that were in the secular sphere. So,
That's awesome.
and that's just one little thing, right? But the more I'm listening, I'm eating my popcorn on the bleachers here, and I'm like, all of these philosophical presuppositions are being thrown around and no one knows or no one cares or someone cares but tries to hide it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you're confusing so many people. And it's kind of shallow. It's not actually like serious wrestling, like philosophically with the way
Yeah.
ideas develop in history.
Yeah.
And last plug I'll make is this one book that just blew my mind. I've read it twice, and I want to read it a third time because every time I read it, it's like reading a new book, and it's so
Interesting.
profound.
So it's like the
It's
Bible. Is it the Bible?
no, it's not the Bible.
Yeah.
That would be the correct answer, though,
Yeah. Right.
normally. But no, I'm talking about David Schindler's book called "The Politics of the Real." It,
Hmm.
it seems like it's not related, but I'm telling you, that book, I mean, it's incredible because it calls into question all of these modern presuppositions. And it actually argues that a lot of Christians, right, believe in what he calls an extrinsicist fashion, right? Like Christian propositions are placed on top of a lived secular liberal reality, right? And so, in other words, there's this quote from a French poet that says, the thing about modern Christians is that they don't believe what they believe.
Hmm.
So anyway, the whole book shows basically how, like, because we're in a post-Christian world and because we're using categories that have been quite literally transubstantiated by liberalism, when we adhere to what we find in Denzinger, right, we adhere to it with words that mean substantially different things. And so that's
Yeah.
why I argue that's why, like, after Vatican II, things went crazy, and then you got this split between the progressive and the tradition, because Vatican II is trying to recover the substance of the tradition in a
Right.
world that had transubstantiated a whole lot of terminology.
Yeah.
That's a longer conversation, but anyway, I'm just kind of frustrated when I see some of these ping pong battles going online,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you're presupposing religion was a thing back then. It
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because even within our own tradition, with the rise of modernism and neo-modernism, where you take
Mhm.
terms and you redefine them, and then you
Yeah.
equivocate in the arguments that you're using. It's very dangerous. And I can think of our conversations with Protestants when they speak of
Mhm.
prayer, and even when we speak of terms like worship, there's a semantical shift
Yeah, there
that
you go.
is
There's another one.
undergone. And
Yep.
so yeah, it's very it's hard because they can go back and they can read very flowery prayers to the Blessed
Oh,
Virgin Mary, saying, we worship thee,
yeah,
thy pure Virgin. It's like,
yeah,
Catholics do worship Mary. Oh my goodness,
yeah.
that worship must be exactly what I think is worship. And so
Mhm.
it's very difficult because we're not on the same page within our own traditions a lot of the times, but across the Tiber, we're not using the same terms for the same thing. I think
Yeah.
of the debate of
Mhm.
ancestral versus original sin, and
Ah,
equivocating the stain of sin and the guilt of
yeah,
sin. And then you think of the Protestant reformers talking about the guilt of sin and what that
yeah,
really means. So there's so
yeah,
many.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very difficult to get beyond the word games and the equivocations to get to the
yeah.
substance of what we're talking about. And that's why using very particular language to describe like latria and dulia. Like those are very narrowly defined things that didn't always have a narrow definition. I think of hypostases and homoousios. Those didn't have set meanings, but when we give meanings to those terms, they begin to function with a sort of hinge to kind of bring us together in the conversations that are happening. And so the word games very fun when we when we see them online.
No,
It's like,
I agree. Yeah. Well, so I put in the chat here, you guys send us questions and we'll see if we can answer any questions as best we can. And before we do that though, I just kind of want to talk about like maybe like you and I can brainstorm and what might be a way forward in light of everything we've said, right? In online Catholic apologetics, right? Maybe the role, like I'm thinking of the role of beauty. So I want to incorporate a kind of dimension of beauty in my apologetics, where I present an argument, but I also show how the argument, it has a kind of beauty to it because its explanatory power is helpful and it makes sense of a lot of things. It's it's not ad hoc but also Catholic poetry, Catholic music, the greats of like Mozart, Beethoven, Palestrina. Anyway, so what's a fruitful way forward in Catholic apologetics that kind of moves away from that? What do you think? What might be a
that's a wonderful articulation of it because beauty is very important, and I think that has to do with the articulation of the faith and the articulation of our arguments in defense and for the faith. And Carl Keating in his what is it? I'm reading a few sections of it.
Fundamentalism.
Yeah, Catholicism and fundamentalism. He has one of the last two chapters. He speaks of a good apologist needing to marry delivery and content in order to be fruitful. And so, if we're just giving this dry, not relevant way of articulating the faith, no one's going to listen to us. And not only that, if it's not rhetorically moving, then people are going to lose interest, And so we have to understand why it's important, and we have to have passion. We have to defend the faith with charity and things like that. But delivery definitely matters. And the beauty, the notional beauty of the Catholic faith, if it's articulated accurately and with passion, with love, it's very moving. And so we have to work on our delivery, because I'm working on a video response to Jeff Durbin, and the way that he articulates his position and his concerns for the Catholic faith are sometimes a lot of the times they lean on the polemical, they lean on the rhetorical, but the rhetorical skills of a lot of Reformed Baptists in their preaching and in their street evangelism is phenomenal. And so we have to find a way to be able to respond in a rhetorically effective way, but with the substance of the truth, because we can't have a rhetorical battle. We can't like overcorrect and just, look how smart I am, look how clever I am because I had this really cool like one-liner that I gave. We can't have that. But no, delivery matters a ton. And so I think that paired with going back to kind of the weaknesses of Catholic apologetics is we have a failure, not everyone, we have a failure to memorize verbatim New and Old Testament passages and their references. We are great at having the sense of Scripture, of speaking of parables and things of that nature, but quoting verbatim the passages of Scripture with the reference is what a lot of Protestants, especially evangelical fundamentalist types, are looking for. Because when you ask them to justify a position like Calvinism, they're like, okay, Romans 9, John 6, all these, I have them in my memory. I've memorized them because, I've done this Bible study way long ago with some friends. So I know the passages. I'm going to quote them verbatim to you. I don't even need to look it up or open my Bible, or at least when I open my Bible, I know exactly where to go. That is missing in a lot of Catholic apologetics, but that is what I appreciate about people like Steve Ray. I mean, but he grew up Baptist, so he understands that. And so it depends on your audience, but that's something that we need more of. But a lot of it might be because of the broadness of our tradition. We have a lot of things to take into consideration, which is good. We have a lot of material, but sacred Scripture is very important in that venture. So yeah, sorry, ramble, but
No, dude, that's phenomenal. In fact, I was just gonna say, like, you know what you should do? You should put together a course and sell it online. Catholic
oh man,
Apologetics course. I don't know. I know you're
Catholic
busy, but I'm just
Apologetics
saying
course from the Catechumen
that would
confirmed
be awesome.
Easter
I'd sign
23.
up.
I don't know about. Hey, maybe one day. I am.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to help out any way I can, and so a lot of that's free content online. But I'd completely
Mhm.
consider books, courses, stuff like Bible studies,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I'd love that. Doing that as my job is like a dream, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I think about it every day.
Keep at it. I don't know. I'm hoping to eventually teach. I mean, that's kind of what I'm aiming for, right?
Okay,
But
that's awesome. Are
yeah,
you are you still at Holy Apostles? I thought you were an alum.
so I am on my last semester of my master's. So I
Okay.
did my I did my BA with Holy Apostles, and then like I didn't take a
Oh,
break. I went straight into the master's, and now I'm
right.
on my last semester. So I'm actually working on my master's paper right now, and I'm
Oh.
taking a break to do this video. So
Oh,
when
there
I'm
we
done,
go. Yeah.
I'm gonna go
Your
right
brain.
back to it.
Right.
Yeah. No, but yeah, the curriculum at Holy Apostles is just great, and the
Yeah.
tuition is affordable, and it's all online. I mean, it's a
It is
no-brainer for
one of the
anyone out there.
most affordable Catholic post undergrad degrees that you can get.
That's
It's
orthodox
ridiculous.
and yeah, exactly.
Dude,
Yeah.
getting my master's is the price of one semester at OBU. All of the semesters at Holy Apostles to get my master's is one semester
Yeah.
at my undergrad. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. That is
That's crazy.
crazy. I don't know how that pans out, but the intellectual stimulus I get from Holy Apostles professors is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Yeah, I could
No,
go,
yeah.
but yeah, it's crazy.
No,
It's
what if I had a TA during my bachelor's. His name was Paul Chudicorn, and
mhm.
I hope I said his last name right, but because we were actually kind of friends on the outside of class, and so but he was grading my paper, so I'm like,
Oh,
yo, take it easy on my paper and make sure I have an A in the class at the end.
yeah,
That
right.
didn't influence him in any way. He actually gave me a grade that I wasn't too happy with,
Oh,
but I did kind of deserve that. It was funny. I was trying to marry Scott Hahn and John Paul II in a paper on conscience, and it didn't work. Anyway, so that was a while ago. That was like 3.5 years ago. Anyway, no, it's a great school. They have some great teachers, and
yeah,
I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to get a Catholic education online. That would be a good
yeah,
way to go.
for sure.
So we got some questions here. I mean, if you have to go, let me know. We can cut this short, but I just want to scroll up here.
I gotta
Okay,
go grab a beer actually, so I can answer these questions adequately.
do it. You want to? Go ahead.
Yeah, because I think it was Drew. Drew had said every time you say Benedict, you have to take a sip.
I
So I think
tried to not say it.
that
Yeah.
might have to happen. I don't know. I'll be right back. I need to.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, while Braydon is gone, let me see. Oh, we got Eric's in the chat. Drew's in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and go through all you guys' questions. Make sure you put at the Logos Project so I can differentiate them. I know there's some questions here that don't have at the Logos Project, but I know they're intended for us. So I'll go ahead and do my best to pull them up. Let me scroll all the way back up. And David has the first question.
We're
David.
back.
All right. You ready for this, Braydon?
Yes, I've got my coffee beer with me.
I
Imperial
join you, but I
Stout.
don't have anything in the house. Yeah. All right. David's got the first question. Okay. How would you approach discerning if someone is even open to any argumentation at all? And how would you approach someone who is very viscerally opposed to Catholicism? What do you think, Braydon?
See, that's so tough because those are the types of people that we want to engage in the most.
Yeah.
So it depends on two things. One, if it's your friend, or if it's like a coworker, if it's someone that you're regularly interacting with, or if it's just a stranger like online on Facebook. I'd say if it's a stranger online on Facebook, take this as a teaching moment that the Lord says we will be slandered, we will be maligned because of him, and we're blessed for it. A lot of the online apologetic sphere is unfruitful, and it's a great segue into being uncharitable. And so we need to be very careful about that. If it's someone we know, if it's, even if it's just kind of a friend or an associate, that's where the door kind of opens more. And this is the
Mhm.
paradox that I noticed when you gave me some of the questions for
Yeah.
tonight to kind of look over. The paradox I noticed in kind of thinking over being reaching out to our friends is the people that we're closest to are some of the hardest people to make that I don't know, engagement with. And
Yeah.
so like we're scared of offending them, we're scared of affecting the relationship, but they are some of the people that we can most impact. The
Yeah.
closest people we are, the people we're closest to, hardest people for us to reach out to, but the easiest people that we can reach. And so the closer they are to us, the more we can affect them. And if they are close to us, they can see the way that we're living our life. That's one of the best ways to preach the gospel, preach the Catholic faith, is by living faithfully, living as a faithful
Yeah.
Catholic. But for someone who is viscerally opposed to Catholicism, only engage them by answering the questions that they have, by letting them know, like, this is what the Catholic Church teaches.
Mhm.
When we go a little bit beyond that and we start
Yeah.
arguing with these kinds of people, we have to understand which arguments are going to be beneficial
Yeah.
to them and to the people who might be even seeing this. If we lose our temper, or if we think we might lose our temper, probably best to not engage and keep the prayer, especially prayer and the what is the Benedict quote, prayer and work. That's kind of the monastic
Oh, yeah. Or
approach
at
to
the boat.
evangelism.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
you pray for them, and the way that you live your life is a great testament. But yeah, it's hard, especially when they're family members or spouses or brothers or
Mm.
sisters or parents. Yeah, it can get hard.
Yeah, especially when it's family and close friends. Yeah, so be gentle. And here's the thing: like, you don't have, like, your life's not going to end if they don't become Catholic, and God has a plan for them, and they might become Catholic later. It's not. You're not in charge in changing the world, right?
Yeah,
God is going to change the world. All you can do is plant the seeds of God's, grace, right? So, and I like to think of it this way: like, first, make sure you're a good friend. So deepen that friendship. Do you like this person? Would you go have a beer with them? Right.
yeah,
And another thing would be, like, know your faith well. So if there's some blank spots in your faith, maybe kind of, rewind this video and listen to the book recommendations we've been giving. In fact, this is a good opportunity. I want to give two. These are the only two books I want to recommend to anyone watching this when it comes to the best way to talk about the Catholic faith and why it makes sense compared to other traditions, is what I'll call it. And you guessed it, they're both by Ratzinger, right? So the
yeah.
first one is called to Communion.
Everyone got a drink. Remember, you have to drink.
Called to Communion. It's funny because at the Bible study I lead locally, right? They make the same joke every time I bring up Benedict. They call it Dom Bingo, right? They all have to click on it.
You gotta get it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is called to Communion. Strongly recommended. This one is called just God's Word, and the subtitle is Scripture, Tradition, Office.
Oh,
These two books right here, like, are indispensable. They answered all of my questions. I mean, they leave other questions open, but when it comes to this particular topic and talking to Protestant friends, these two books are so good. The best I've ever come across. Just putting that out there. That being said, anyway, friendship, know your faith, and the last thing I would say would be, like, maybe give them a sense of the beauty of the Catholic tradition. I mean, Pope Benedict said
yeah.
that the best arguments for the faith are its tradition. It's tradition of beauty and the saints, not some
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
syllogism. Anyway.
The communion of saints is such a draw. And at first, as a low church Baptist, it's like, pray to saints. You pray to, who do you pray for whenever you lose your car keys? It's like all these weird, like, Catholic,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
popular what is it? What do you call it? Folk Catholicism, kind of like
Yeah.
understandings of Catholicism. You
Yeah.
start realizing the communion of the saints and how robust that is in the Catholic theology. Like, there are people who are in heaven ministering to God right now and worshiping before the Lamb, who have gone through similar situations as me, who I can relate to, but who are venerated for being faithful to God in the vocation that they've been given. And so, over the last year, growing in devotion to some of the controversialist saints, St. Robert Bellarmine, St. Francis de Sales, St. Thomas More, like all these people are like so, and I wish I knew about them before, because I didn't get associated or acquainted with them until after I converted, like way after I converted.
Yeah.
But these individuals who spent so much intellectual work in responding to the Protestant movement, phenomenal.
I agree. And just like the holiness of their lives. I mean, it speaks volumes. There's another quote that I don't remember verbatim, but something like the true exegetes are the saints. Their lives are an exegesis of scripture, right?
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, what else we got? We got David's got another question, and he asks, so ... when are you two going to submit to the true reflection of Christ's authority on earth, Pastor Bob's Bible Church? Never. Okay.
I don't know. Whenever he gets another campus in Oklahoma, maybe I will. But he's only got one campus right now. He's the senior global pastor of
okay, we do have a very serious question this time by Drew the Catholic, and that serious question is, what prank are we going to play on Kyle Winnington?
I hope Kyle doesn't watch this, because we gotta figure this out right now. We have to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We could set his house on fire.
Oh my goodness, that'd be so good. That'd be so awesome, because it's like there,
Yeah.
we can, while he's away, we can. That'd be so awesome. Oh no, okay. Kyle's here.
He's here.
We should.
Wait, let me scroll down. We
should put $100. We should put $100 in every roll of his socks in his drawer. That's what we should do to prank him. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Drew's got, how will evangelism change as the world is increasingly digitalized and isolated from community and the real world? How do we engage this digital continent without being malformed by it? Dude, that is the question. Man, I don't have an answer. It's something, Drew's been thinking a lot about the influence of technology on us, period, right? Man, but it's like, it's kind of scary. Like it changes the way we think.
Let's ask Chat GPT what he thinks. it thinks. That is a tough question. That is a tough question.
Man. I think that it's gonna get worse. I think that the best way, this is my take. Okay. I think that using YouTube like you and I do, right, is important precisely for the reasons that we talked about earlier, which is that this is the first avenue for most people. But we have to put on YouTube content that transcends the platform, that doesn't fall to all of the bad aspects of the platform. So it can't be data dumping information. It can't be something that's not fueled by prayer, right? It can't be something that doesn't have intellectual virtues. So all of those things is what I would say. Oh, we got a super chat.
Man, let's go.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you. All right.
To start. Oh, yeah, there. To start the
I'm like scrolling. I'm scrolling up and down here trying to find the. Okay. Right. Could you expand Delvin? So could you expand on what is the virtue of religion and secular, as in priests? Yeah, so secular, it comes from the Latin seculum, which just means age, right? The age, time, right? The lapse of time, the temporal, right? I mean, one translation is the temporal order, and so versus religio is a virtue. It's a subset of the virtue of justice, and it's rendering to God what is his due, which is kind of our whole being, giving it back to God, basically through worship. So St. Thomas understood religion as a virtue, a specific virtue that took on a social dimension. And I mean, Ratzinger kind of builds on this, and he talks about religion as the kind of network of values grounded on the worship of God that creates culture, right? And he doesn't want to separate religion from culture. That's kind of a modern move. Good. And yeah, so secular just means the temporal, this worldly, versus the eternal, what transcends the temporal sphere, what's the realm of God and spirituality.
So
Okay,
what you said
so
earlier was the parish priest versus kind of the Franciscan Benedictine kind of
yeah,
brother.
so
Is that
so the Mendicant orders maybe is not the best example to use because they're like religious, but they're also somewhat secular
Mhm.
because they engage in especially Dominicans teach and they
Preaching?
do
Yeah,
missions, all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. But ultimately, religious meant the Benedictines, the Carthusians, the contemplative religious people who said the liturgy, right? And
Okay,
then
that
the
makes sense.
secular priests were those parish priests that were in the secular sphere, in the
That is
temporal
so
sphere.
fascinating. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another example of how words are literally transubstantiated, right? Like they
Yeah,
look the same, the accidents are the same, but they mean something radically different.
yeah,
And liberalism, and by that I mean classical liberalism, right? Like going back to the Enlightenment thinkers and even having roots before that, like distorts all of our language in a way that's kind of scary. Anyway,
yeah.
so what else do we got here?
That's the substance of modernism is taking words and changing their
Yeah.
meaning, and then oh yeah,
Mhm.
I affirm this creed, but I completely redefine what the
Right.
resurrection of the dead means. I just mean a
Yeah.
spiritual, like that.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Um, well, David says, I will only sign up for this apologetics course if Braydon wears one of those glasses with fake eyebrows and mustache. That is
I need to grow some facial hair, but I can't. I was not blessed with those genetics. I might as well just have Nico sit in my chair and do like a voiceover or something like that.
Oh man. All right, Eric's got a question here. Any of you read on the Marks of the Church by St. Robert Bellarmine? Something interesting in the realm of apologetics is how each mark may appeal more or less to different people. So yeah, so it looks like Braydon's
Yes.
got the book right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's crazy, and I think this was a trend during the 15th and 16th centuries, expounding upon. Well, it wasn't a trend then because I mean Saint Augustine was doing it, but expounding
Mhm.
upon what the marks of the church mean. I mean, Saint Robert Bellarmine has like 16 different categories that fit into the four
Yeah.
marks. So cool, and like that's why I said in my response to Dr. Gavin Ortland about the Catholic Church being the one true church. Even apart from historical knowledge, even apart from deep knowledge of the scriptures, someone who is completely isolated from that kind of sphere of thinking
Mhm.
can look at the Catholic Church and recognize her validity in a certain
Mhm.
sense from the external marks, from the external motives of credibility. So the oneness, the unity of the Catholic Church
Mhm.
is very unique in that
Mhm.
sense. And yeah, there's doctrinal unity, and there's even stuff for like continuity with apostolic teaching in the tradition.
Yeah.
And so actually he puts that under Catholicity. So
Mhm.
same teaching from all times. All time
Yeah. Yeah.
the Catholic of time is what's embodied in the Catholic Church. So it's he does a phenomenal job at on it's in this volume. Who did this? I don't even know who did this. It's like someone online noticed there was no modern translation of Bellarmine. He just like,
Oh,
all right,
really?
let's do this crowdfunded translation of Bellarmine. He started translating it. They're
Wow.
not even done. This is a 3-volume unfinished set. So I have 2 volumes so far.
Oh, this is a perfect opportunity for a plug, real quick. If you guys, so Bellarmine, his theology is in Latin. So if you want to read some stuff that hasn't been translated, but that is in Latin, you should go to www.theecclesiablog.com and sign up to my Latin course and pay me
Hey,
some money so I'm not homeless.
I need to do
And
that.
then,
There we go. I need to learn Latin. I'm trying to hold on to my Greek right now. I know my professor, Dr.
yeah,
Kelly, is like kind of cringing right now because I'm like trying to grasp my Greek and like read my New Testament in
yeah.
Greek, but I'm losing it. I'm so sorry, Dr. Kelly. I'm so sorry.
Dude, so that's the thing that I regret because I've been at Holy Apostles and I didn't take any Latin and Greek classes at all,
Hmm.
but I wanted to, I really did, but because of the curriculum and just my degree plan, whatever, I end up not being able to do that. but I would love to take a Greek class, especially, I mean, because like you read a lot of New Testament scholarship, and sometimes they don't translate the Greek; they just put
Yeah.
it there in the paragraph, and I'm like, really? So I got to pull out my phone,
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Take a picture of it and like highlight it.
yeah,
Yeah. Dude, I
exactly.
took 4 semesters of Greek. I would not have been
Really?
able to do 2 of those semesters if
Mhm.
my I think it was I think it was Dr. Kelly. He accepted my request to substitute biblical Greek for modern language. And so I didn't have to
Oh,
take modern
nice.
language. I think I took a semester of Spanish like my
Yeah,
sophomore year or something like that. But for
yeah,
my
yeah.
one of my modern language credits, I just took biblical Greek. And so yeah, it was awesome.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. Any more questions? Here we got Delvin here. Where were you referring to as the spirituality as said today? I'm not sure. This is probably like a follow-up question on something else.
Yeah, what did
Uh,
I say earlier?
were you referring to what were you probably is what were
Oh,
you referring
religion and secular. Was that
Oh,
part of that question?
yeah, maybe that's what it was. I guess spirituality is probably not the best word to use. It's the difference between um, what I would call the immanent and then the transcendent. The immanent is kind of like the nature of things and their internal powers, and the transcendent is like the origin of things, the source of things. Which we're talking about God. We're talking about the Trinity, the source of the creation of the world, and so in that way of understanding it, angels would not be religious in a certain sense. They would be, even though they're not part of time, they would be part of creation. So that's the thing, you see, right? Like when we say spiritual or religious today, right, we mean that incorporates like spiritual beings like the angels.
Mhm.
But for St. Thomas, the angels are natural, right? And then they're given supernatural grace, but they're not supernatural beings. With the way we use the term supernatural,
Yeah,
we mean those things that are not material. But that kind of
right.
bespeaks a materialist worldview. And that's
Facts.
another thing with the Eucharist, right? The people think that it's more real if we say it's like physicalistically there, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to spiritually. But and again, that can be used in a proper way and misused in a improper way. But like, why do we think that what's material is more real than what's spiritual? Like,
Hmm.
kind of pause button there for a second. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's modern materialism. That's like what the atheists think. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
When in
food
reality,
for
it's more like the Great Divorce, and you take the trolley up to heaven, and it's like you try and
yeah,
step on the grass. It's more real, so it's like poking your feet
exactly.
of how
Yeah,
real the spiritual is.
exactly. Yeah, so Delvin's I probably should not have said spiritual, right? That's probably was unhelpful. See, my modern mind is still being converted, so bear with me. Um, let's see. I think that's all the questions. David, thanks again for the super chat. Really appreciate it. If there's any more questions, guys, if not, I guess we can end with let's see. What are some goals that you have, for example, we got another question here. Before I
Oh,
ask you
there it
that
is.
question, yeah, I think Delvin's clarifying. I was talking about people today speak as Franciscan spirituality and Dominican spirituality, etc., with religion. Oh, I see. Are you saying that kind of what I meant by spirituality is now called? Sorry, what I meant by religion is now called spirituality. No. Here's why. Uh, uh, religion has to do with the liturgy, specifically divine worship, like essentially, not like the different rite in the sense of. So different religions might be different ways of worshiping God. So you could say, for example, that the liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom, in this way of using the word, is a different religion from the Roman Mass, right? But we don't mean that today, so don't say it that way today because
Yeah.
people get confused. But
Yeah.
spirituality has to do more with like the rule of Saint Benedict or the teachings of Saint Teresa of Avila for the Carmelite spirituality. That's not directly related to the liturgy, so it's more has to do with the liturgy. All right, and David just adds, I had a presumption that the spiritual was like the leftover scraps of whatever couldn't be explained by material science. Yep. So a kind of mushy other bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Braydon, what do you see as the path forward in Catholic Protestant apologetics online? Like, I know it's a
Yeah.
broad question, but how, like,
It's tough.
what's your last thoughts? Yeah.
keep the conversation going. I think this venture of providing freely accessible material online and having this open dialogue with people who are willing to be charitable, but also convictionally sound is very beneficial. Keeping the conversation open, keeping the charity with the conversations, not letting that go by, not letting it kind of slip up. Charity, keeping the conversation going. I think we need to have more open dialogue, and I think that's kind of what I'm aiming for with this dialogue with the other Paul over the infallibility of ecumenical councils, and just having this one-on-one kind of back and forth, talking about concerns, talking about just epistemological justifications for beliefs. But honestly, just dialogue. Don't shut it down. Don't shut it down. Don't be a bully, and you see a lot of that online because it's easy. It's easy when you're talking to a camera and you see a bunch of pixels on your screen. You're not talking to a person. You can just shut the camera off, shut the laptop, and just head out. But speak to people humanely. Like they actually are real people with real thoughts, with real feelings, with real concerns. But yeah, I think keep the conversation going. Keep the clarifying the Catholic position, but being clear about the Protestant position as well. Because when you don't understand the concerns of Protestants or the beliefs of Protestants, you're not really ready to engage in the dialogue. And there's so many different flavors of Protestants that you don't really realize when you start getting into this conversation, that it's like, oh, different people have different concerns and different things that they want to emphasize and point out. And it's very difficult to kind of have a conversation going on all sides. That's kind of what the internet is your voice is accessible by anyone who wants to access it. And so you might frame things in ways that don't really touch on the beliefs and concerns of another Protestant group, or maybe even misrepresents them, or kind of collapses everything down to one monolithic thing when it's not. Protestantism isn't monolithic. It's very broad reaching. And so we need to stop making sweeping generalizations and keep the conversation going and take into consideration their concerns.
No, I love that. I think that's a great answer. I mean, in fact, maybe all I would add was like, not just keep the conversation going, but let's try even maybe to deepen it and to we're Christians, right? So our common ideological enemy, because no one's our enemy, and if they are, we pray for them and we love them, right? But ideologically, it's the kind of materialist, atheistic, kind of culture of death, promoters out there. Ideologically, we have that in common, that we're both against that. So maybe if we could develop a deeper way, be known as the Christians, could be known as the smart people, right? And not just like we have a lot of information, we're like encyclopedias, right? But like genuine virtues, like a wisdom that can actually offer something to culture and to the secular sphere that's actually appealing. Like, I don't know, it's sometimes like it's just this back and forth use of syllogisms, and there's a lot of philosophical presuppositions taken for granted, and it seems very surface level at times in my perspective. And maybe I'm, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little superficial as well here, but the point though is that like let's actually I'm thinking of Chesterton, right? Chesterton argued with people that did not see eye to eye with him at all, like ideologically radically opposed to each other, but they were friends and they were gentlemen, right? They were erudites, they were cultured, they were intelligent, and they were witty, and there's something about that that's appealing. I mean, Chesterton is hilarious. Like I want a beer with that guy, like he's absolutely hilarious. So that right there is an argument. Like if you're a gentleman that's witty and cultured, that's an argument. So I don't know. I'm kind of on my soapbox here. I'm just saying, let's deepen the conversation.
You're right, though. You're right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was all that I had planned to talk about. So Braydon, thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll have to.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah, no, anytime.
I'm excited to see you at the Creators Conference. And for any
Same.
Catholic creators who have not signed up yet, come and see
We'll
us.
have
It's
to
going to be awesome.
Yeah. We're gonna be torching Kyle's house, so yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be torching some cigars at Chesterton's, at Chesterton's Cigar
That's what we're
Lounge.
gonna
It's going to be awesome.
that's what we're gonna be doing. Yep.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, if you like this video, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe. That helps me. A lot of people watch this but don't subscribe. That does not help me. And hit the notification bell if you want to be notified for the next video. And of course, if you don't want me to be homeless or working at McDonald's, you can support me at patreon.com/the Logos Project. And so without further ado, we'll see you all next time. Thanks, Braydon.
Peace.
And there we go.
Boom. It was great chatting with you, man. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thanks. You too. Yeah. Where do you live?
I'm in northern Oklahoma, like an hour from Kansas. So
No way.
yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be a long drive. I'm picking up Swan from Kansas on the way, and so it's gonna be a great time.
Wow. Wait just a second. This says here the stream is having. I want to make sure we're not still live.
We are live. I see it. It says live in the top. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another stream.
What? No way. What is going on? Why is it not ending? Oh, my internet ended. What the heck?
That's so weird. I
Just a
wonder if
second.
we're like actually still live, or if it just says live. We are.